There is something quietly happening inside your body every single night while you sleep, and most men have absolutely no idea it's occurring. Your liver, one of the most metabolically active organs you have, enters what researchers and traditional medicine practitioners alike describe as its most intensive phase of activity somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning. It is filtering, processing, recycling hormones, neutralizing compounds your body no longer needs, and preparing your entire system for the day ahead. And here is the question that should make you pause for a moment. What if the quality of that nightly process is quietly shaping your energy levels, your digestion, your hormonal balance, and even your sexual health in ways you have never connected to a single cause? What you are about to discover is not a pharmaceutical solution. It is not a supplement protocol or a complex biohacking routine. It is something that has been used across cultures for thousands of years, that modern science is now beginning to validate in meaningful ways, and that a growing number of men are quietly incorporating into their nighttime routine with results that genuinely surprise them. The subject is castor oil, but not in the way you might expect. The application method, the timing, the biology behind why it works, and the specific mechanisms connecting it to things like sleep quality, hormonal function, circulation, and erectile health. That is the conversation worth having, and it requires going deeper than most people are willing to go. So stay with this, because what begins as a simple nighttime habit turns out to be a window into some genuinely fascinating biology. Castor oil is pressed from the seeds of the Ricinus communis plant, and its history as a therapeutic agent stretches back to ancient Egypt, where it was referenced in medical papyri for its healing and protective properties. Traditional Ayurvedic medicine in India incorporated it extensively for digestive and inflammatory conditions. Traditional Chinese medicine has long recognized the liver's role in overnight detoxification, and castor oil packs, applied over the liver region, have been recommended by naturopathic and integrative practitioners for generations. But here's where it gets interesting from a modern scientific standpoint. The primary active compound in castor oil is ricinoleic acid, a monounsaturated fatty acid that makes up somewhere between 85 and 90% of the oil's fatty acid content. This is not a compound found in many other natural oils, which is part of what makes castor oil pharmacologically unique. Ricinoleic acid has been studied for its anti-inflammatory properties, its ability to interact with prostaglandin receptors in the body, and its effects on smooth muscle tissue, the type of muscle that lines your digestive tract, your blood vessels, and other internal structures. These are not minor biological mechanisms. These are pathways that touch digestion, circulation, pain signaling, and tissue repair simultaneously. Research published in peer-reviewed literature has confirmed castor oil's effectiveness as a laxative when taken orally, primarily through its action on prostaglandin EP3 receptors in intestinal smooth muscle. But what has been studied less extensively, and what integrative practitioners have long observed clinically, is what happens when it is applied topically over specific regions of the body consistently over time. The evidence here blends controlled research with substantial clinical anecdote, and understanding both layers gives you a far more complete picture. When castor oil is applied to the skin, particularly in a concentrated pack format over the liver region, something physiologically interesting begins to unfold. The skin is not an impermeable barrier. It is a living, dynamic organ with documented transdermal absorption capacity, which is why nicotine patches work, why hormone creams are prescribed, and why topical anti-inflammatory medications exist as a legitimate medical category. Ricinoleic acid, being a lipid-soluble compound, has the molecular characteristics that allow for meaningful skin penetration, particularly with prolonged skin contact under light compression, as occurs with a castor oil pack. The liver sits in the upper right quadrant of your abdomen, just beneath the lower ribs on your right side. It is, by function, one of the most critical organs in your metabolic and hormonal ecosystem. It processes every hormone your body produces, including testosterone and estrogen. It filters the blood coming from the digestive tract before it enters general circulation. It produces bile for fat digestion, detoxifies alcohol and environmental compounds, regulates blood sugar, and manages hundreds of enzymatic reactions that occur continuously. When liver function is even subtly compromised by poor sleep, processed food, alcohol, environmental toxins, or chronic low-grade inflammation and bile, the downstream effects ripple outward in ways most people never trace back to the source. Fatigue that does not resolve with sleep, brain fog that arrives each morning with surprising regularity, hormonal imbalances that show up as mood shifts, low libido, or sluggish metabolism, digestive discomfort that physicians cannot easily categorize. These are often the quiet signs of a liver that is overloaded and undersupported. And this is exactly where the castor oil pack, applied consistently over time, enters the picture as something worth understanding. Practitioners who use castor oil packs clinically describe three primary mechanisms of action. The first is anti-inflammatory modulation. Ricinoleic acid's interaction with prostaglandin receptors reduces local and potentially systemic inflammatory signaling. Chronic low-grade inflammation is increasingly recognized in research as one of the foundational drivers of metabolic dysfunction, hormonal disruption, cardiovascular risk, and even cognitive decline. Anything that meaningfully reduces this background inflammatory state is worth attention. The second mechanism is lymphatic stimulation. Your lymphatic system is your body's internal drainage and immune surveillance network, a vast web of vessels, nodes, and fluid that collects cellular waste, immune cells, and metabolic byproducts, then transports them toward the organs of elimination. Unlike the cardiovascular system, the lymphatic system has no pump. It moves through pressure, muscle contraction, breathing, and external stimulation. Several practitioners and researchers have proposed that castor oil packs applied over the abdomen stimulate lymphatic flow in that region, supporting more efficient clearance of inflammatory mediators and metabolic debris. While this mechanism is more difficult to study quantitatively, the biological plausibility is solid and the clinical observations consistent. The third mechanism is parasympathetic nervous system activation. This one is perhaps the most underappreciated. Your autonomic nervous system operates in two primary modes: sympathetic activation, which is your stress or fight or flight state, and parasympathetic activation, which is your rest, digest, and repair state. Most people in modern life spend the majority of their time with sympathetic dominance, cortisol elevated, digestion suppressed, sleep fragmented, recovery incomplete. The act of applying a warm castor oil pack to the abdomen before bed, the warmth, the sensation, the deliberate ritual of it, appears to activate parasympathetic tone, shifting the nervous system toward a state that is conducive to deeper sleep, better digestion, and more effective overnight recovery. Now here is where the conversation about men's health becomes particularly relevant, and where many men find the most compelling reasons to actually try this. The connection between liver function, sleep quality, inflammation, and erectile function is not theoretical. It is grounded in well-established physiology that most men have never had explained to them in an integrated way. Erections are, at their most fundamental biological level, a vascular event. They require healthy endothelial function. The inner lining of blood vessels must be capable of producing nitric oxide, dilating appropriately, and delivering sufficient blood volume and pressure to penile tissue. Anything that compromises vascular health compromises erectile quality. Chronic inflammation is one of the primary drivers of endothelial dysfunction. It damages the vessel lining, reduces nitric oxide availability, and impairs the signaling cascade that makes erections possible. So when ricinoleic acid reduces systemic inflammatory signaling, it is balm through a completely logical physiological pathway, supporting the same vascular environment that erectile function depends on. Testosterone is the second layer of this connection, and the liver is right at the center of it. Your liver produces sex hormone-binding globulin, or SHBG, a protein that binds to testosterone in the bloodstream and renders it biologically inactive. When the liver is functioning suboptimally, SHBG levels can rise, reducing the amount of free, biologically available testosterone your body can actually use. This is one of the more overlooked mechanisms behind age-related testosterone decline. It is not always that the testes are producing less, it is sometimes that the liver is binding more. A liver that is detoxifying efficiently, processing hormones cleanly, and operating with reduced inflammatory burden is a liver that is less likely to contribute to this hormonal imbalance. And then there is sleep, the third pillar of this integrated picture. The vast majority of your body's testosterone production occurs during sleep, specifically during the deep, slow-wave stages of non-REM sleep. Research has shown clearly that even 1 week of restricted or fragmented sleep can reduce testosterone levels in young, healthy men by 10 to 15%. That is a clinically meaningful reduction, enough to affect energy, mood, motivation, body composition, and sexual function. When the castor oil pack supports deeper, more consolidated sleep through parasympathetic activation, reduced digestive discomfort, and the gentle warmth that facilitates relaxation, it is creating conditions under which your body can actually complete the overnight hormonal replenishment cycle it is biologically designed to perform. Men who begin using castor oil packs consistently often describe a progression that unfolds over the first week in a way that feels surprisingly linear. The first night or two tends to involve a noticeable sensation of warmth over the application area, sometimes a mild tingling, and a feeling of physical relaxation that makes falling asleep easier. For men who typically lie awake for 30 to 60 minutes before sleep onset, this shift can feel immediately meaningful. The parasympathetic shift is likely responsible. The body is receiving a signal that it is safe to move into rest and repair mode. By the second and third nights, digestive changes begin to emerge. Reduced bloating, more comfortable digestion, and more regular bowel movements are among the most commonly reported early effects. This makes biological sense. Ricinoleic acid's prostaglandin receptor activity in gastrointestinal smooth muscle supports more efficient peristalsis, and the lymphatic stimulation over the abdominal region supports better fluid balance and reduced visceral inflammation. For men dealing with chronic constipation, sluggish digestion, or the kind of post-meal heaviness that disrupts sleep, this shift can feel transformative. By the fourth and fifth nights, most men begin noticing improvements in sleep quality that go beyond simply falling asleep faster. Fewer nighttime awakenings, more vivid dreams, a sign of REM cycling, and waking up with a clearer head are among the consistent reports. And it is around this point that men often begin noticing something that catches them off guard: improved morning erections. This is not coincidental. Morning erections, technically called nocturnal pineal tumescence, are a direct marker of the quality of overnight testosterone production and vascular function. When they return or strengthen, it is the body signaling that something in its overnight recovery cycle has improved. Better sleep, reduced inflammation, and more optimal hormonal processing are converging into a measurable physiological signal. By the end of the first week, the accumulated effects of several nights of improved sleep, better digestion, reduced inflammatory load, and supported liver function begin to compound into something more tangible: energy levels that feel different from the morning rather than requiring coffee to establish, reduced puffiness, and a sense of physical lightness that was not there before. Skin quality improvements, as reduced internal inflammation shows on the surface. And for many men, a meaningful uptick in libido and erectile quality that feels grounded in how the body is actually functioning, rather than as a temporary or artificial effect. The practical application matters considerably, and getting it right makes a meaningful difference in the results you experience. The quality of the castor oil itself is the foundation. You want organic, cold-pressed castor oil in a glass bottle. Not plastic containers, not heat-processed oil, not diluted blends. Cold pressing preserves the integrity of ricinoleic acid and the other minor fatty acid compounds that contribute to the oil's biological activity. Organic certification reduces the likelihood of pesticide residues that would be counterproductive to the liver support you are seeking. A castor oil pack, a piece of unbleached flannel or cotton cloth that you saturate with the oil and apply directly to the skin, concentrates the contact with your liver region and holds the oil against the skin for an extended period. You apply the saturated pack to the right side of your rib cage where the liver lies. Cover it with a layer of clothing to hold it in place and prevent staining, and sleep with it throughout the night. If you have access to a low-level heating pad, applying it gently over the pack for the first 20 to 30 minutes can enhance relaxation and may support deeper skin penetration of the oil, but it is not essential to the practice. Consistency is the variable that determines outcome more than any other factor. The mechanisms at work here are cumulative and adaptive. They build on one another over repeated nights rather than producing their full effect from a single application. If you are evaluating this approach, commit to a genuine 30-day trial with consistent nightly use. 1 week will give you a meaningful signal. 4 weeks will give you a clear answer about whether this practice is something that meaningfully supports your health. There are reasonable precautions to observe. Do not apply castor oil over broken, irritated, or infected skin. If you have known skin sensitivity, begin with a smaller amount and increase gradually as your skin adapts. If you have a diagnosed liver condition, speak with your physician before beginning any hepatic support practice, including this one. Castor oil taken orally has a much stronger laxative effect than topical use and should be approached with appropriate caution. The protocol described here is specifically topical application. Some men wonder whether they can simply rub the oil directly onto their skin without the pack. You can, and you will receive some benefit. The ricinoleic acid will still be absorbed and will still exert its anti-inflammatory effects. But the pack format maintains consistent, prolonged contact with the liver region through the night, which appears to produce more meaningful results based on both clinical observation and the logic of transdermal absorption kinetics. The sustained contact time matters. What this practice ultimately represents is something that is easy to underestimate because of its simplicity. We live in a health culture that tends to equate complexity with effectiveness. The more elaborate the protocol, the more steps involved, the more it costs, the more seriously it is taken. But human biology does not reward complexity for its own sake. It responds to consistency, to reduced inflammatory burden, to quality sleep, to supported organ function, to the gentle removal of physiological obstacles that have accumulated quietly over years of modern life. Castor oil applied over the liver before sleep is, in its simplest form, a nightly investment in the conditions your body needs to do what it is already designed to do. Detoxify efficiently, regulate hormones cleanly, repair vascular tissue, produce testosterone, achieve deep restorative sleep. None of these are processes that your body is incapable of. They are processes that get interrupted, suppressed, and degraded by the accumulated burden of inflammation, poor sleep, hepatic overload, and sympathetic nervous system dominance that characterizes most men's experience of modern life. The insight worth carrying with you after watching this is not simply that castor oil is useful. It is that the systems governing your energy, your hormonal health, your sexual function, and your mental clarity are far more interconnected than most of us have been taught. Your liver is not just processing food, it is managing your hormones. Your sleep is not just rest, it is the primary window during which testosterone is produced and vascular repair occurs. Inflammation is not just joint pain. It is a systemic state that quietly degrades cardiovascular function, hormonal signaling, and metabolic efficiency over years and decades. When you begin looking at your health through this integrated lens, when you start understanding that the fatigue, the digestive sluggishness, the declining sexual vitality, and the fragmented sleep are not separate problems requiring separate solutions, but rather connected expressions of a few foundational systems operating under strain, the path forward becomes clearer. And sometimes, the most meaningful interventions are not the most complicated ones. Sometimes they are as quiet, as ancient, and as elegantly simple as what you do in the hour before you close your eyes. Give your body the conditions it needs. Respect the biology that operates while you sleep. And pay attention to how your body responds, because it will tell you, clearly and honestly, whether what you are doing is working. That conversation between you and your own physiology is one of the most valuable ones you will ever learn to listen to.